It's funny how we overanalyze a lot of things when they're pretty straightforward, right? And we do weekly Facebook Live videos of me actually sourcing where, no, I just grab the brand name, throw it into Google, and within at least the first 3 results is the brand's name. And then people are like, yeah, but Dillon, every time I call a brand, they don't pick up, or every time I email them, they just tell me we're not selling to Amazon sellers. Sure. But this is where the opportunity lies heavily for sellers. Hello and welcome to the Wholesale Made Easy podcast, where we believe selling on Amazon shouldn't be hard, and we're going to prove it. My name is Dillon Carter, and I'm one of the co-founders at VinDrive, a tool that helps Amazon wholesale sellers streamline their businesses, stay organized, and land more profitable accounts. I'm sitting down with other successful wholesale sellers, and together we're sharing lessons learned and what it really takes to succeed with wholesale. Today's episode is very different than the rest. After having Jenna Jackson on the podcast twice, she called and asked to interview me instead. So today, we're turning the tables as Jenna asks me the questions and puts me in the hot seat.
So Dillon Carter started selling on Amazon. Started out in RA and OA and quickly realized that he was hitting a ceiling, that he wasn't able to grow as fast as he wanted. So he started out with wholesale and really ran into a lot of hurdles, a lot of obstacles that a lot of wholesale sellers are running into, and figured out a method called reverse sourcing that has completely changed the way I run this. And for many sellers as well, his method has been very successful, and I am excited to be a guest interviewer of Dillon Carter today. Welcome, Dillon.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love it. That was so good. That's cool. Oh, that's great. It feels so awkward being on this side of it.
Good. I'm glad.
So we're, not to jump in, but I got to play podcaster because I'm used to it. So today we're flipping the script. Jenna Jackson, you're going to interview me, and I get to answer all the questions.
The blueprint that you've written needs to be a podcast. I would like to interview you. I want to ask you the questions, and I want to get all the information that's in your head, because it's what has made my business so successful, and I want to make sure that that information is very easily available to all of your listeners.
And the blueprint that you're referencing is what we put together, which is called the 7-figure blueprint. It's free. It's not some like expensive course or like ebook. It is an ebook, but it's not like quote unquote ebook, right? That I basically realized after writing so much content for the VinDrive blog, I'm like, you know what, we can reorganize this, because we had so many like new people coming in and be like, hey, like that's a lot of information. Where do I start? And like, what's the natural progression? And I'm like, that's such a good point. Let's put this together in a way that you can, it's like from start to finish, like it flows with how a wholesale Amazon seller would experience these things in order, and then throw in some more advanced stuff that has nothing to do with Amazon, but everything to do with just business and growth. So we released that. It's free. Obviously we'll have that in the show notes, but yeah.
And there are a lot of sellers out there that are looking at spending thousands of dollars in courses to learn everything that you learn in this blueprint. And I personally believe if you read the blueprint and then you watch some of your live sourcing videos in your Facebook group, it's the Facebook group, it's called Amazon FBA Wholesale. If you watch some of those live sourcing videos, you will have everything you need to know about selling selling wholesale on Amazon. So I can't stress it enough.
Yeah, there's really not much more. Like, I mean, you've experienced it. I've experienced it. We've all have experienced this where you've poured over content, all this information, and you're like, but I'm just still missing this last piece. But what I've realized is that last piece is actually just doing the work, and the last piece is really just experience. And so, not that I'm against expensive courses, because I'm not, but I think for the majority of people getting started with this who don't have 10 grand to where they can sink 20% of that into a course, I don't think it makes sense for you to spend $2,000 on a course when you can spend that $2,000 on inventory and have a business.
So when you started out in wholesale, tell me a little bit about the ride. You started it out, dabbed your foot in. dipped your foot in, and then what wasn't going well? What did you like? What didn't you like? And what led you to begin this reverse sourcing?
Everything. Gosh. Okay. So I started like we all did, retail arbitrage. Got sick of peeling Target discount stickers because you would have stacks. Oh my gosh, the stacks. It's just ridiculous, right? I was like, okay, I know what I'll do. I'll do online arbitrage. That's more scalable. Realized I suck at online arbitrage. I could not figure that business model out. And I know there's people that are like, Dillon, really? You couldn't figure that out? No, I couldn't. It's fine. And I had this preconceived notion for some reason. I don't know where it comes from or where it came from, where I thought you had to have tens of thousands of dollars to get into wholesale. That was the big boys playing ground. That's just my perception of it. And then I dug more and more into it, met other sellers in the communities, and realized you don't need that much. At the time, what I was doing with RA, excluding OA, because that was just a joke in and of itself, was figuring things out. I was just learning the business model of how to sell on Amazon, listing, all that stuff. So I wasn't really making much money. It was just something I was figuring out. And I was a personal trainer at the time, doing well. And then me and the GM of the gym did not see eye to eye on something, and we parted ways. In which I said, well, I can either continue being a personal trainer, because I had clients who were like, hey, just tell me where you're going. We'll follow you. If it's your house, your garage, that's fine too. And I had really liked the idea of selling on Amazon. And I was like, you know what? This might be a good opportunity to really put myself in a corner and just have to make it work. And so when I laid out all the options, private label wasn't going to work. That's going to take too long. I can't support myself that quickly. Retail arbitrage, I understood, but to me, it wasn't scalable enough. And online arbitrage, like I said, no idea what I was doing. So wholesale it was. And I pretty much just stopped sourcing everything unless it was wholesale. I gave myself a little asterisk. You cannot buy inventory unless it's wholesale, period. Even when you're struggling, you're eating ramen noodles, tough. This is the rule. And so that's what I did. I locked myself up for 3 to 4 months until I figured it out. And it took 3 to 4 months just to figure it out, because I understood what I was doing conceptually, but from a tactical standpoint, or from a procedural standpoint, I had no idea. So I'm Googling wholesale suppliers, distributors, toy distributors. This is what we all do when we don't know how to approach it right. And I remember getting those price lists that were 10, 20, 100,000 SKUs deep. And then you get so excited, you scan it, which takes like 2 days, by the way, when they're that big. And you come back and they're like, there's nothing here. And you're like, wait, but there's got to be one. Out of 30,000 SKUs, you can't tell me there's not one. Yes, I can. that's literally the math, right? And that doesn't mean working with distributors doesn't work, but I realized quickly, because I had learned about reverse sourcing online on some blog, and a bunch of other sellers were talking about it, and they're like, yeah, this is kind of like you just start on Amazon. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. So I just went that route. And the first version of me doing quote unquote reverse sourcing, because that's not what it was really called back then, at least, was a little bit more like cumbersome the way I did it, and it was taking too long. And then I realized there's a better way, a more streamlined way of doing this, and that's when I started to kind of craft that. And because I didn't invent reverse sourcing, like that's not my invention. I didn't stumble upon it. Like, I just made it more, put it this way, I made it cheap to acquire that information, aka free, and just say, guys, this is how you do reverse sourcing. This is how you do leaf sourcing. It's what it is, right? And I just made it a little bit better and streamlined. And because when you have to teach it to somebody, because we had users in our Facebook group that are like, hey, like, how are you doing this? Like, okay, well, if I've got to teach this, I've really got to understand it. And I've really got to be concise about it. And obviously this is like later down the road. So for the first 3 to 4 months, I struggled. I lost money. I learned the hard way of the definition of risk mitigation, which is why we talk about it all the time now. Like, I didn't place a test order. I didn't use the average BSR and average price for my calculations. I used the current one, which looked great. It said I could move 100 units. So I bought 100 units. Then the average PSR was way worse. And instead of moving 100 units per month, I was moving 5. And I learned that the hard way. And it just threw a lot of throwing things against the wall, and pretty much, the whole like burn your bridges or burn the boats, whatever it is. Like, that's really what I did. I was like, just make it work. I didn't have a ton in savings. It's not like I had a year runway. I didn't. I barely had 4 months. But once I got that figured out, and I read a lot of books on, building systems and processes and doing the work that is effective. That's why I say all the time, like, you should be spending like 95, 98% of your time sourcing and talking with suppliers, because that's all that really matters. If you really boil it down, that's it. And so once I kind of got that figured out, I just started ramping up. And then, grew it decently, not a crazy huge seller, that's why we're not trying to be gurus or anything like that. It's just, we found a way that's easy to teach people how to get into this by showing the realities, but also not saying, oh, here's this clever new way. It's like, no, this is straightforward. There is no clever new way. You just got to do the work.
So what exactly is reverse sourcing?
So reverse sourcing is, and I'm not even sure, I kind of get why it's called this, but whatever. Weird tangent I won't go down, but it's, instead of starting with a supplier, when it comes to the wholesale, all this is within wholesale, you're actually going to start with demand on Amazon. So typically what you would naturally do, and what I naturally did, what a lot of sellers naturally do initially, is you start on the supply side. So you go find great products, quote unquote, by distributors, and then you bring them to Amazon. That's his own business model, and that's fine. What we've found is more scalable and consistently scalable is starting on the demand side. Let's go find products that are already doing well on Amazon, that are undervalued in terms of how much volume they can be doing. Because it's not just, let's cut another slice of the same size pie. Like, no, like, let's increase the size of that as well. We do that. And then here's the reversal side. You go get a direct account with the supplier or the brand. And if you can, obviously you go with the distributor, and then you bring that to that listing. So it's reverse because it's the reverse order of what you would naturally do, but it makes the most logical sense. It really does, because it's not like private label. I'm not trying to launch products. That's not the point with wholesale. With private label, absolutely. With wholesale, though, I'm looking for products that I can place a test order and be sold out within a few days, and then place a restock order, and then I'm churning inventory every 2 weeks. So from a cash flow standpoint, it's fantastic. So it's really just, it's finding products that are already doing well on Amazon, but could be doing better, and plugging into that demand, because it's an underserved listing. So we plug our supply into that demand.
So do you have a set criteria that helps you identify which items are going to be selling well?
Yeah. So everything's got built-in risk mitigation, which is basically don't lose money. So for me, there's a handful of things, 5 major ones. One, I want 30% gross ROI, and gross ROI just meaning every cost related to that product per unit is factored in. Business expenses like tools and subscriptions, that's a different kind of expense. So I want 30% gross ROI. I want $4 in profit minimum per unit. And the reason for that is it gives you enough dollar amount in margin to start playing with PPC. Because you can have somebody say all day long, hey, Dillon, I'm getting 200, 300% ROI. Great. But ROI is relative to the price point or your cost, right? So when you say, well, what's it returning in dollars? Well, $1 per unit. Okay. There's not much room for you really, right? And even if you move 1,000 of those units per month, you're only making $1,000 per month. But on products where you're doing at least $4 per unit, which is my third criteria, moving at least 30 units per month is much easier. And you're not looking for products that are going to, that are going to move thousands and thousands of units per month. That's great, but that's an outlier. That's just not the average that you're going to see. It's typically going to be in the hundreds, and you'll have, 10 to 20% of your inventory will be at least breaking through the thousands. So the first three are 30% gross ROI, $4 in profit per unit, and then 30 units per month that I'm moving. The fourth one, and this is to help me while I'm scanning for products on, so I use DS, Amazon Quick View, right? It's a Chrome extension, it's free, it's great. And it pulls to the product listings on Amazon, how many sellers, how many FBA sellers, if Amazon is currently on the listing, the BSR, I think that's pretty much it. That and like Keepa, right? Like we use Keepa, which Keepa just had a nice little update this morning. That was interesting. Everybody's freaking out, so we'll have to see how the pricing plays out with Keepa. But so the fourth one plays into that because while I'm sourcing, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. I mean, you're scanning and scanning pages upon pages, right? So to make it easier on yourself, I'm just looking for 3 FBA sellers or more, and that Amazon's not on the listing. That's it. So 3 FBA sellers is important, and it's a rule of thumb. It's not, it's not something you have to do, and it's not perfect, but it helps me save a lot of time. When there's 1 or 2 FBA sellers, on average, it's private label. I don't want to waste my time looking at private label products. That doesn't mean that they all are, but 80% will be private label products. So instead of me even taking a look at them, I'm just quickly scanning. When there's 3 or more, the likelihood is far less, in which case, yes, I want to take a look. And that fifth one really is just, I don't want to compete with Amazon. I know that's controversial. I know everybody, everybody has their own view on it. And we have some users who are like, dude, I compete with Amazon and I kick their butts all day. I'm like, that's great. Not me. I don't want that headache. I joke about this all the time. Like, I'm effectively lazy. I don't want to do things that I don't have to do if the alternative is better. Right. And that's, I think, why I like wholesale as well, is I don't need hundreds of SKUs. I don't need dozens of SKUs to do 6 and 7 figures. You just don't. Obviously, you got to make some assumptions there, but for the most part, to get to 6 figures with wholesale, you don't need a ton of SKUs, and that's what I like, because it's less management, right? I mean, it's more focusing on the business and growth.
What are your thoughts on the BSR, the best sellers rank, and how high you're willing to go?
So from a BSR standpoint, it's funny because everybody throws out this, especially when we do it like our Facebook lives, like, Dillon, what do you think about this BSR? Or, Dillon, what do you think about this listing that has 30 FBA sellers on it? It's one variable of the entire equation. So as a general rule, I stay below 50,000 for a BSR. But the BSR, especially the average BSR, because you should always be looking at the average, is only one variable of the equation. The equation is, and it is super simple, right? It's the category, including the average BSR for that category, and how many sellers are on it. So you can say, Dillon, there's 30 FBA sellers on here. Is that too competitive? I don't know. If the BSR is 5 in toys, maybe not. If it's 50,000 in home and kitchen, probably. So it's relative, right? So you need to factor in and never discount a product because of one thing, unless it's a major thing. You want to see, okay, on average, how many units can I move per month? And this is just an estimation with the current competition plus me coming in. So, using Jungle Scout's free estimator tool as an example, you throw all the numbers in there, and it kicks you back, 1,000 units per month. There's 9 current sellers. You're going to jump on be the 10th. You can do that math and know how many you can estimate per month. But I have my buying criteria, which we just talked about. So all of that has to be green light. If one of those things, once we have the whole equation laid out, isn't on point, I either need to negotiate, look at how I'm going to change something, or drop that product. Because I'm not, and this is very key. This is like my major caveat for everything. This was huge for me when I realized it, is stop looking for reasons to buy product. Look for reasons not to buy it. Because if you can't find reasons to not buy something, you should probably at least place a test order, right? I'm looking for red flags because there's so many things we can't see or that aren't blatantly obvious. Obviously, the more experience you get at sourcing, you start to be like, yeah, okay, this looks great, but look right here. That's a huge red flag. I've seen this before. Here's what that actually means. And I'm looking for those things. And if I can't find one, okay, let's place a few $100 test order. Why not?
Buying a $5 product or a product that's going to sell for $5 on Amazon is going to be difficult with the fees. Tell me your thoughts on what you like the price.
Oh, okay. So this was a huge turning point, and I want everybody to experience this, hopefully right now and not later. Higher priced items are fantastic for a number of reasons, and I'll touch on a few of them. The biggest concern with sellers, especially newer sellers, is I don't want to look at higher priced products because I don't have a lot of money and I probably can't afford them. Wrong. Don't worry about that right now. Because when you can have great products that are expensive, you're actually in a better position than having a ton of low priced products. Minimum, I don't go below 20. Minimum, period. Yeah, I don't see the point. Now they can be good volumes, but you got to consider how many sellers go after that stuff. And again, I'm not looking to carry hundreds of SKUs. I just don't. I want to keep adding new SKUs and getting better and growing, the portfolio of products here. But, the products that are over $100 are fantastic. The customers, nicer. When something goes wrong, they email you and say, hey, this went wrong. What do you think we should do? Not just, hey, this was terrible, 1 star. It's not like that. It's phenomenal.
Explain the difference in the fee structure of Amazon.
Yeah. So in terms of the fee structure, the only thing I really want to touch is and this kind of goes hand in hand with the whole heavier products. People just assume because it's heavy, it's going to be ridiculous and you're not going to make money. And it's not worth it. And same thing with the expensive products, right? Because they're oh, it's a percentage. It's relative. Okay, that's fine. But again, that's one variable of the whole equation, right? So if you can still make money on a product that weighs 40 pounds and you're still hitting your buying criteria, the weight's irrelevant. And same thing with higher price products. But the thing you got to consider is on your higher price products, the dollar amount in profit is tens of dollars. So we're talking upwards of $80 per unit. So you want to talk about scaling a product from, let's just say organically, it's going to do 50 units per month. Outside of, listing optimization, which you should absolutely do, running PPC to that is going to be $5 per unit in additional sale. So you're still going to make $75 per unit, which the ROI is still going to be good, I promise you, and be able to grow it from, 50 to 70 to 80 units per month. I mean, you're talking thousands of dollars at this point. And so it can feel uncomfortable when you place a $10,000 order for 100 units. Yes, I've I've had products that they cost me 116 and some change wholesale, and that's good pricing, but they make $50+ per unit. That's great. Now, are there a ton of those out there? I don't know. There's enough. I can tell you the majority of the people who are yeah, I've never really looked at those. Look at them. I mean, spend an afternoon when you're applying filters on Amazon, because what we'll do is we'll jump into a subcategory, say only show me products that are 4 stars and greater, because I want good quality products, and then a minimum price. Set that to $300 and just see what comes up. Don't set a max. It makes me sad when people actually set a max of $50. I'm no, there's this whole other world that's up there that you're just saying, no, I don't want to see you. And that's, in my opinion, where a lot of the value and opportunity lies for a lot of wholesale sellers.
You want the history as far as the price, the selling price of the product.
Yeah. So something, and this ties in with using the average BSR and using averages for your calculations, is I want a stabilized or a mature product. All that means is that the price has not fluctuated dramatically in the last year, which means it's stabilized, right? So I'm not worried about it going crazy. And I'm looking for the BSR to have a lot of volatility, because that indicates sales, obviously, but I'm looking for a small spectrum. So if we see a lot of, volatility here, right? Lots of jagged edges, but on the high end of that BSR for a year is 5,000. Pretty happy with it. You know, the biggest thing to keep in mind is stop going after trends. Don't go after seasonal things. Seasonal things are fine. Those are supplemental to you having stable products. Those are short-term opportunities. I want products that I can carry for a year, 2 years down the road, because once I have it this month, that's all the work. Now I'm just placing restock orders, checking my PPC campaign, you know, and you know, especially once the listing optimization is pretty much taken care of too, like what else is there for me to do but place restock orders? You know, so it's pretty low maintenance. So a lot of what we do is actually really front loaded. That's why it's so painful initially, because you have to do a lot of this work, and then you get, you know, let's say a small handful of accounts, and then you take a step back from sourcing because you need a break, but the revenue keeps coming. You're like, wow, that's kind of nice. You get to see the benefits of all that, but you know, you need to find products that you can carry for, you know, minimum 3 months. I mean, ideally, if I can't carry it for a year, I don't really see the point because it's very short term. Yeah, it's kind of like my biggest issue with RA is the work you do today or this week or this month has nothing to do with your benefit a month down the road. You're constantly chasing a paycheck. That's not a business, that's a job. So what's the point? I don't know. It's kind of my view on it though.
So you have this set criteria to identify what products you want to sell on Amazon. Now you got a list of products that you're excited about. What do you do then? How do you find the manufacturer? How do you find a distributor? What is your recommendation for the next step there?
Google. No, I mean, but really though, it's funny how we overanalyze a lot of things when they're pretty straightforward, right? And we do weekly Facebook Live videos of me actually sourcing where, you know, I just grab the brand name, throw it into Google, and within at least the first 3 results is the brand's name. And then people are like, yeah, but Dillon, every time I call a brand, they don't pick up, or every time I email them, they just tell me we're not selling to Amazon sellers. Sure. But this is where the opportunity lies heavily for sellers who think that it's saturated, who think that you can't do it. No, this is where you shine, period. We do sales. Get that through your head. That's it. If you can understand sales, which are just people, by the way, it's not hard to have these conversations. And when you hear things like, hey, we're just not accepting new Amazon sellers right now, that's called an objection. Every objection has a method to which you can overcome it, at least on average, right? So in personal training, it was the financial one. I sit down, we go through an hour together, say, perfect, listen, I think we need to spend 3 months together to hit your goals. That's going to be $5,000 today. Long pause. I'm waiting for an objection. I have to talk to my husband. I have to talk to my wife. I need time to think about it. That's just too expensive for me. Things I understand, but you have to understand, let's take it back to wholesale. It's the same thing. And a lot of times, and you've experienced this, which was super fun, by the way, from my end, when you called me after, where a lot of the questions you're being asked or the things you're being told, it's a layer above the root of what's actually happening, right? So a lot of these questions are really qualifiers. So it's a qualifier when you call a supplier and they say, hey, we're just not taking Amazon sellers right now. You go, okay, thank you. Have a good day. You just got disqualified because you gave no pushback, because you just said, yes, I'm just an Amazon seller. I'm not worthy of this. Thank you. Bye. Same thing with emails. You send them, their auto response is no Amazon, please. And you just go, okay. And you move on. No pushback. The one you went through, which is a financial one, and this is a big one, where so you'll get pushback. Let's say they kind of want to work with you, but they're giving you some pushback, and they like you because you really do have to sell yourself. You do. You got to show personality. Again, you're just talking to a human here, right? They're going to give you some pushback. Hey, I got to talk to my boss. Who's got to approve this? Who's got to talk to his boss? We just got to see if this actually makes sense. Listen, I get it. It's a qualifier. Basically, they just said, we're not sure if you're a right fit. Let's help them with that. Simple thing is typically a financial one. Listen, I'm I want you to know I'm not some small fish. I'm not looking to spend $500 with you. I'm looking to spend 10 to 20 grand with a supplier in the next 30 days. If that's with you guys, that would be phenomenal. Already, I think we would have a good, working relationship together. It'd be fun to actually work with you guys. Your products are really cool. That's something I can get behind. And if not, listen, I get that too, right? I don't need you. So I'm going to take back some power, but I'm letting you know you're not going to do a bunch of work and me send you $500 orders every single month. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have 10 to 20 grand. You're not saying I'm going to give you 10 to 20 grand guaranteed. No, it's got to be profitable. And if it is and you don't have that money, well, you'll find a way, I promise you. Even if that's net 30 terms, you'll figure it out. But it's understanding how to approach those conversations and what's actually happening outside of the face value stuff. You hear it all the time. But what's funny is, and you've experienced this now, there's like 4, maybe 5 objections, and they're all the same conversations, just worded maybe a little bit differently.
What are those objections?
Yeah, so the biggest one is the one I just went over, which is you're a small fish. And it's not like, but Dillon, I'm new. What am I supposed to do about this? Like, I don't have a track record. No, you don't. But are you just saying, you're right, I don't have a track record, thank you, bye? Of course not. I had to go through that. We all have to get our first accounts. It's how this works is the evolution. So what you need to do is get them to understand where you're going. So I sold the story. Listen, I'm within the first year of doing this, fairly young, trying to figure it out, hustling. We're talking with our first, handful of suppliers right now to start onboarding a few. My goal is to be spending, like I said, 10 to 20 grand in the next 30 months with a single supplier. And if I need to do that with a few, that's okay too. I would prefer to do it with just one. It's a little bit easier for me to manage. I'm not telling them like, here's my benchmarks, here's my record. I'm telling them, here's what I'm doing. I would love for you to be a part of that. And if not, that's okay too. It's like dating, right? Like, it's funny when you ask a girl out and you're just like, hey, do you want to go out this weekend? And it's like that pause. It's awkward. But if you're like, hey, you want to go out this weekend? If not, don't worry about it. It's totally cool. I'm letting you know, like, hey, it's okay if you're not into me. I'm cool. Like, emotionally, we're good, right? And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, nah, I'm not really into you. Okay, cool. Not a big deal, right? It's more casual. It's more like calm, to be honest. But you have to understand that so many sellers reach out to suppliers and demand a lot, and then ask for exclusive deals on the first phone call, which, by the way, never do that. And then try to get, 30, 40% discounts before even placing an order. And then you place a $500 order. And I don't mean like a test order. That's normal. I mean, for the next 3 months. And you stop returning their phone calls. You stop calling them. You don't email them. You build 0 relationships. Don't be a small fish. That's a big one. 2 is kind of, it leads into what I just said, which is like that communication side too. Have good communications. Pick up the phone. Gone are the days of sending emails. Listen, I went there too. It was great. You didn't have to talk to anybody, but the second you start picking up the phone, the better you're going to be. And you've experienced this too, where it might take you 2 to 3 months of follow-up, but you'll get that account. I just talked to somebody, one of our users for Aura, who does wholesale. He's like, no, I've been working this account for 3 to 4 months. It's like, and then I got it. And now he's on track this year, because this was last year. Now he's on track this year to triple his spend with them and negotiate into an exclusive agreement in person over dinner. Guys, this is still business. This isn't some online, I'm going to be chilling in Bali, selling products on Amazon. That's private label. Y'all do what y'all want to do. But this is still old school business. And I hate even calling it old school, because it's nothing old about it. It's the same stuff, right? It's deal making. You're not placing an e-commerce transaction. It's deal making. That's it. You got to be flexible, ask for a little bit of flexibility on their end. You'll make it work. So being a small fish, not spending a lot of money, communication, and then going into really like not understanding the pains from their perspective. Like that first 3 to 4 months, I realized I was getting nowhere because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to have those conversations. And every time they would like tell me no, like a hard no on the phone. Say, hey, listen, totally fine. I get it. While I got you here, can I ask you a few questions? Because I want to understand it from your perspective. Why is this painful? I need to know, right? You don't follow map. That's one of them too. You have terrible communication. You expect everything, and then you place no orders. But you expect to be like a VIP buyer of ours, but you're our smallest buyer. It's things that sellers don't ask, and it's so interesting to me. It really is, when you can just have a simple conversation and it's not painful. They're happy to have it. Trust me. If you're like, why do you not like Amazon sellers? They will give you everything. That's the playbook. They're telling you everything to overcome. So if you call them, you get them to enjoy having a conversation with you. Good communication. You qualify yourself. Hey, I want to spend 10 to 20 grand with a supplier right now. Okay, now I'm not a small fish. Especially if you're talking to a rep who's thinking 10% of every number you throw at him. Yeah, that's a little bit better than $500. Map, I'll preemptively let them know, because a lot of suppliers will throw out this little comment as like a filter and be like, well, a lot of our products have maps, so you probably won't be interested. Actually, 90+% of my inventory is map enforced, and I actually prefer that. It's one of my main buying criterias that I prefer. It's not a requirement, but we actually help our suppliers manage that too. Oh, really? Yeah. No, I'm enthusiastic about it, right? So I'm basically laying out a list of all their concerns and either answering them or solving them before they get to it, or immediately when it's brought up. I have these things ready to go. So as soon as they have this little comment, I just launch, because again, it's the same questions, just formatted differently. So my response doesn't need to change. When I say it might change, because I might be triggered to say it before or at that time, but it's the same conversation. And when you do that, what's interesting is you do it enough and you have these responses down to where, like, there's this interesting pause from the supplier side of the phone where they're thinking like, damn, I was hoping to get this guy off the phone, but he just answered it. Like, they're thinking of other questions to answer or to ask you. And they're like, all right, well, I'll send you a application. Because, like, what else are they going to do? It's either no or application. And you just gave them every possible reason to not send you a no. So they're like, yeah, I'll send you an application. I guess we'll start working together. Yeah, it's great, And
let me tell you how I used what you just taught in one of my phone approaches. Is I called someone up and they said, I'm sorry, we're not taking any more Amazon sellers. And I went, good for you. Good for you. You have control of your Amazon selling. And, because what I hear from a lot of suppliers, they say, they're placing orders, resellers, they're placing irregularly. They're, placing orders November 15th for all of Christmas. Like, I need to know these things ahead of time. You can't just wait till the last minute. They don't communicate with me. They just call me out of the blue and place these huge orders. Well, I have to manage my inventory too. And they don't follow map. I mean, they're just, I hear so many suppliers that are saying all these negative things. And, that's why we've really been as successful as we've been, is because when you understand those things, you can provide a much better experience for the supplier. So good for you for managing, how many sellers you have. And all of a sudden they go, okay, here's 4 things she just listed that I hate about Amazon sellers. Because she listed them, it tells it subconsciously, I've read the sales book, subconsciously it tells them she will not do them, right? Which makes sense. So I have you to thank for that, because I've been able to continue the conversation. Even after they say we don't take Amazon sellers, instead of going, oh, okay, thanks, and going, for you, you've really got a handle on this business, don't you? You've had some pains with your past resellers, because I bet you they've done this and this and this, and they go, she understands.
Today's episode is brought to you by GoAura.com, our AI-based repricing tool. If you're ready to take your sales to the next level, repricing is the way to go. No more manually adjusting your prices each day. Let our AI actually do the heavy lifting for you. And if you're sick of repricing tools dropping their activity and leaving you in the dark, Aura can help. With smart repricing strategies, an optimized platform, and instant repricing, Aura both reprices faster and holds the buy box for 65% more time than competing repricers. If you're ready to experience repricing reimagined, head over to goaura.com to start your 14-day free trial. Yeah, and honestly, that's all they want to feel is like, you get it. Like, so even in the earlier times, like I played around with this just because I'd been making so many phone calls. After a certain amount of time, you just get a little weird. It happens. You're just like, I'm just going to try some weird stuff. But same thing. And, like, yeah, no, Amazon sellers suck. They're like, what? I'm like, no, like they're a pain in the butt to work with. And I just went into that same list, right? And I'm like, and honestly, like it's kind of annoying because me as a real business owner, like I'm approaching this correctly. Like I'm not an Amazon seller, like I'm an e-commerce business owner. Like, yeah, we sell on Amazon because it's a great sales channel, but it's a pain in the butt to work with. Like, tell me more about how's that experience been with you? Like so far, like how have you guys kind of overcome that? You're going into a conversation, you're building that rapport. And you said something that was important too, is like, even during like the Q4 madness, I'm going to place an order for 3,000 units. That doesn't mean it's going to get filled. And that's painful for a supplier because it's not like they always just have inventory lying around that's unaccounted for or unsold, right? So you saying, hey, listen, I know Q4 is typically crazy for you guys. Just so you know, what I typically do is I'll request a quote, a quarter ahead of time, and I'll post date it. That way, and you guys tell me, what's your lead time? I want this to be good for you guys. I want to increase sales with you guys, but I don't want it to be painful. If your lead time is 15 days, cool. Let's make that work. That way I don't have unrealistic expectations. You guys don't have to feel like you have to, work 24/7 to get these to me. No, let's make it easy. Like it's logistics. Like, it doesn't have to be hard. And it's just, I don't know. I think, and this is my biggest realization this year, been a long year, but so far this year, where too many sellers stay within this industry and they don't step outside of it, right? They don't remember the fact that this is just business, or call it what it is, and why I keep saying, like, we do sales. So that should be a little light bulb that says, okay, go learn more about sales. Stop learning about Amazon. Learn about the fundamentals of what we're doing. Step back from the tactical side, the mechanics, and get to the principles of what we're doing. Go read 5 books on how to do sales, especially how to overcome objections. Fantastic. How to do cold calling, because again, that's all we're doing, just as we give it a different name. Read books that are about business but have nothing to do with e-commerce, have nothing to do with Amazon, because you're going to learn stuff. And at the end of the day, it's not just us selling on Amazon. It's a real business, assuming you approach it that way, which is like a major caveat as well. Like, don't be a quote unquote Amazon seller, be a real business owner. There's a difference. And the decisions you make, being a Amazon seller, are very short term. How much revenue can I get next month versus where's my business going to be like a year, 2, 3 years down the road? That's different. And that's why I like how you approached it, because I remember from the get-go, you're like, when I was saying this, you're like, yes, that's what I want. Like, let's think that far ahead. And now what's interesting, we've had a nice like life cycle here, not life cycle, but like we had a year kind of come through, and you're now kind of going through that first cycle. Like, oh shit. Okay. I mean, you're going to get there. If you want to get there, you'll get there because it's time, but you have to think about where you're going, and you have to make the decisions, like following up for 3 months when you are pretty sure you're not going to get that account. Maybe you do though. And then you get it 3 months later. You're like, I'm so glad I called them every week for 3 months. And it's really not that hard. That's the cool part.
So tell me about when you finally break through and says, okay, let's go ahead and do this. Then what? How do you know how much to order and to mitigate that risk?
Yeah. So the biggest risk here, I've refined it over time, especially after talking with so many users, both, Facebook group, with BinDrive, with Aura. I've actually made it better, which has been fantastic. So initially, obviously you're using your average numbers to get a more realistic average estimation of sales per month, right? That's what we talked about earlier, using like Jungle Scout. That's just an estimation. So if it tells you 100 units, that's great. It's not a guarantee, right? Pure statistics. So I want to prove it. So I'm going to place an order for a case or two. And I know a few people are like, Dillon, but you're giving up so much like opportunity. You're only going to purchase like 12, 24 units. Yes, because I would rather go wrong with 12 or 24 units than 100 or 50, right? So what I do is I play, and I tell my suppliers this too. Listen, I'm going to place a small test order with you, and I call it a test order, not just a small order. I'm placing a test order with you. As soon as it gets checked in and it starts to sell through, I will place a full size order with you. And here's my estimations of where that's going to be. But just keep in mind, I intend on growing this, so it's going to be higher. I tell them the reason for this is because I'm looking for any red flags logistically along the way. Once they're live at Amazon and selling, I have a green light. I need that green light. And I tell them, listen, it's part of my system and process, period. I would just rather have a logistical hang up, a shipping hang up, a prepping hang up on 2 cases than a pallet. They're going to understand that. And it's simple, right? Listen, I'm going to place the order. It's going to take, let's say, 4 days to get shipped into Amazon. The day it starts selling, I have sales data. I can then go look at my forecasting calculations already within a day or two and say, here we go. Let's at least place like, a larger order. I'm confirming the real data. I'm shifting from statistics to forecasting, which arguably the same thing, but whatever, right? I'm using my sales data, not just what some tools told me. Very important. Just granted, I use a tool to do that, but you get what I'm saying. So I'm doing that because, again, I would rather things go wrong with 24 units than 100, especially when you start looking at products where you can realistically move 1,000 to 3,000 units per month. It becomes a big deal, especially with people who come to the table and say, Dillon, I've got $1,500. How do I do this? Okay, strategic. And this is where we were able to kind of make it a little bit better by using leverage, but using it in a creative way. So let's say you have $1,500. The average test order is or like your minimum order quantity, if you will, is not high. It's really like I rarely would go over like $500. But then you have that one toy manufacturer who's like, it's 50 grand minimum. You're like, okay, well, that's not a good fit for me. That's kind of risky. You have enough cash to place a test order and prove if a product is good or bad. I would place 2 to 3 full order, or excuse me, the first test order plus 1 to 2 additional full-size orders just to make sure we're good to go. Okay. At that point, you most likely would maximize your cash. Let's say at full spend with that product you just brought on, you could spend $3,000 per month. You've proven it. You've gone through a test. You're good. Perfect. You go, Dillon, I don't have $3 grand. I know you don't. That's okay. Let's go use leverage. Let's use debt. Obviously calculating the services, the financial service fees, things like that, the interest, make sure our numbers still check off. But it's an easy way for you to go from a $500 test order to spending $3 grand profitably with one SKU. But you still have your $1,500 cash to test SKU B, plus the profit kicking off from SKU A coming back into there. So you're using cash as your test. You're gambling your cash. Let's call it risk, right? That's what it is. It's still a risk you don't know. Probability of it being crazy risky, not very high, but there's still probability there. So we're going to use cash. So if things go wrong, that's on us. But once we have it proven, and we're pretty good, assuming you're following good buying criteria, you're following, stable and mature products. Okay, let's turn on debt. Let's use leverage. That's how you go from, there's only 3 ways you can grow a wholesale business, period. You can take less money out. You can put more money in, or you could do both. That's it. It's your only 3 options. So it's not hard to get money in today's economic climate. And we're not talking about raising like institutional money and all this stuff, right? We're not even talking about like SBA loans. I'm talking like credit cards. Obviously, you got to follow good financial principles, both personal and professional. But that's how you scale from spending $5 grand per month profitably to 30 to 50. You got to do it right. But you you mentioned that shift, and there's a shift that every user will go through, that you've gone through, that a lot of users, we've fortunately have been able to watch go through this shift. And I always call it, and I love it when it happens because it's like a click. You go from having the problem of, I have some capital or a lot of capital, who knows, but not a lot of inventory that I can purchase. I'm scouring for inventory. You fix that problem. Now the next problem is, I have so much inventory, I don't have enough capital. I need double the amount of money I have now just to take on everything I have access to that is profitable. Not even adding anything new, just what you have access to now. So you shift from, I got to learn and figure out how to source, to that's pretty easy, got that, to I got to figure out what I'm going to do about money. I need more. I want to spend $100,000 every single month moving forward. Well, we got to go get it. Right? So if you want to keep growing 30, 50% month over month, you got to put a little bit more fuel on the fire.
So really what you're saying is, I know when I used to be an RA mindset, I used to think, well, I'm going to need to go to many more stores in order to grow. Man, this is going to take a long time. I see all these sellers that are selling millions of dollars. Man, it's going to take a long time. But with wholesale, it sounds to me like you're saying it really doesn't take that long to grow when you do this. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, you don't. And I've made this claim like a year ago. Assuming you know what you're doing, you can have a 6-figure wholesale business in 30 days. Period. It's straightforward. It's not easy, though. That's still a lot of work, right? So it's easy to say it's a ton of work. But if you know what you're doing, it's not that bad. The cool thing, and we mentioned this earlier, is whenever you are in wholesale, when you get an account, assuming it's a good account, all these assumptions, right? That account will be here 3, 6, 12 months from now. All you got to do is place restock orders. Next month, you add 5. Now you have 6. It compounds, it stacks. This, I was talking with Chaz from Side Hustle Pros, because he's transitioning into wholesale, and he's starting to see this, where he's got his first 3 accounts, and he's like, this is great. I just have to place restock orders. It's like, that's it. I'm like, I know. So in terms of being able to grow this very quickly, you can, because you're not constantly, like, you're not trying to scale your time. This is a big issue that I have with business models like RA, OA less, but we can kind of bash those somewhat together, where to scale that business, you need more people. That's okay. But that's expensive. And a lot of people don't want to do that. A lot of people got into this not to manage people. With wholesale, you're not scaling your time. You're stacking it. That's it. You're investing it. You're bringing on new inventory every single month, and you're building a portfolio of inventory that a year from now will still be producing. That's it. And you're just building that portfolio out, placing restock orders. And if you want to scale it, you can absolutely scale your sourcing using somebody in-house, using a virtual assistant, but their time is more effective. Because if they get, let's say, one new wholesale account that's profitable for you per month, and let's just say it's $500 on average in additional profit for each one, that covers their expenses. But again, month 1, that's going to be $2,000. Month 2, it's $4,000, assuming they keep going, because it just stacks that way. And so you can have somebody, so you can be like, yeah, it's expensive to hire people. Yes, for the first few months, but then it's got an incredible ROI. And again, now you have the problem of, I need more cash, because I can spend $100,000 this month profitably. I just don't have it. Great. It's a good problem to have.
How in the world do you keep track of all this? In order to get this many manufacturers, this many suppliers, you're going to have to call a lot of people. Do you have any tips or spreadsheets or any advice on how to keep track of this?
Yeah. So when I started doing this, it was spreadsheets, and I love spreadsheets, but this is not for spreadsheets. Yeah. So this is why we launched VinDrive, our CRM. When me and James met, we're both doing wholesale, and we're just kind of like meeting up once a week, just holding each other accountable, saying, hey, how many suppliers did you call? He was way ahead of me, but we're just sharing a bunch of stuff and learning together. And he's like, hey, so I'm an engineering student, and I built a tool to do this for me. Do you want to use it? I was like, heck yeah, dude. Like doing this in spreadsheets is not fun because it's not automated. And you know how I like automated things. So he showed it to me. I was familiar with CRM systems. But for the most part, CRMs like HubSpot, they're too robust or too expensive to where like, it doesn't really like, it's not a good fit. It doesn't make sense. So he built one out that actually connects to the Amazon API. So it pulls in like product data, stuff like that. And so when I started using that, it was great because he had built in stages or a pipeline. Because again, we do sales, right? So a pipeline is pretty common, or a funnel, whatever you want to call it. So what I could do, because at this point I had hired a VA part-time to do sourcing for me. So I would basically just source from a spreadsheet that she would pre-filter. So it saved me time. It's like, great. And then I realized I could have the VA do all that same work and then just dump it into VinDrive. And then I knew where every supplier was along the path. Did I get a application from them? Did I submit it? Did I place a restock order with them? Have I called them yet? What's terrible is when you do what Dillon did and you're cleaning out your Gmail, because that's how I used to operate, and you find a price list that just got lost in the pure chaos, and it's profitable. And that was 6 months ago. And I mean, you're talking about losing tens of thousands of dollars at that point, just because you couldn't manage it. I mean, this is the hard part with what we do is it is high volume, right? So you went through a switch. I remember when you first jumped into the Facebook group and we were doing Facebook Live, I was like, listen, you got to call 10 suppliers a day, especially when you're getting started. That's the math. If you want to get this thing rolling, that's what you got to do. And you're like, that's way more than I thought necessary, but okay, let's do it. Yeah. But then you started to do it and it started panning out for you. But you know, that means you got to find 10 suppliers per day. You got to keep track of notes, because especially if you're not doing follow-up, start doing follow-up. That's also another system that's hard to track. So when you know, and you have all the notes, like I don't have the best memory. I don't. But the things I need to remember, I have the capacity to do so because everything else is external. So it's called an external brain, right? Lots of people use like Evernote to just mind dump everything in their head and it's stored somewhere. We kind of take that same principle with VinDrive, where in the notes section of a supplier, while I'm talking to them or after, I'm writing down everything I just got from them, every single thing. They told me their kid's name, where they lived, all this, not like in a creepy way, obviously, but when I go to call them back in a week or two, I don't have to remember all these things. And I can just pull up their profile in VinDrive, be like, oh yeah, okay, that's right. I can re-trigger all these things. But yeah, that's Jim. Okay, call Jim. Hey man, how's it going? You know, like Jim likes fishing. Dude, been fishing lately? Like you can scale out those relationships. Obviously, as you build close relationships with suppliers that you do work with, that's easier because you're on the phone with them more often. But the top of the funnel, those 10 suppliers you're calling per day, that's hard to do. And so we just luckily made it easier to track to where calling 10 suppliers per day actually isn't that hard. And so it made life way easier.
Can you talk a little bit about what MAP is for anybody that's never done wholesale? What is MAP? What does it stand for? And how do you reprice differently RA versus wholesale? And can you speak a little bit?
Yeah. So MAP is minimum advertise price, or advertising price. Basically, it's the minimum price you can not sell a product for, but publicly list and price a product for. So there's the strategy where you list your product at MAP, but then once it's in the cart, you can charge less. I don't see the point in that, because if they've already added it to cart, do you really need, like, I don't know. It's come up recently. I was like, I don't really see the logic there. Maybe I'm missing something. But so you will typically have an agreement with your supplier that says, listen, if you're going to work with us, that's great. Our minimum price, $25. It's the lowest you can sell this product. The reason for that is it helps protect the value of the brand, or the perceived value of the brand, because we know how Amazon is. If a product is, mapped in normal brick and mortar at 100, we are trying to sell it for 80, right? It's economics. it's a forced floor to where you cannot do that. Does that mean everybody follows MAP? No. MAP, I love MAP. A lot of sellers don't like MAP because they make, or they feel as though it makes them less competitive. But if everybody on the listing has MAP and you're all selling at that minimum price, and I can tell you, I don't care what they say the MSRP is, you're selling at the MAP price. If MSRP is $50 and they tell you the MAP is 40, that listing's at $40. It's just how it plays out, right? So a lot of sellers have that concern of, well, if we got rid of MAP, I could be more competitive, have more sales, because we're all here and we're all just selling the buy box. Yes. But in the long run, that helps you the most. I love MAP. I need a shirt that says I love MAP policies because they're great. And it's way less work for you. In terms of repricing, now that we're diving deep into repricing with Aura, we're seeing so many different business models. And coming from wholesale, me and James, we get that super well. So the way, we're going to reprice wholesale is going to be vastly different than RA because, and this is going to be different per person too. So let's say my philosophy is I want to move inventory as quickly as possible. I don't care. Okay. So if a competitor, and let's say we don't have MAP right now. Let's say a competitor drops down to my minimum price or below my minimum price, and I'm targeting the buy box. That means the buy box is below my min. If I want to move that quick, I want my price to go to my min so I can move that inventory as quickly as possible. That's one method. The other is what I personally like, especially when it comes to wholesale, is you go down, that's fine. You sell out your inventory, and then the buy box is going to come back up to where it was, and I'm going to get all those sales moving forward. So I'm going to have a delay in sales. Sure. I'm going to let you liquidate. You have to think about what's actually happening. With wholesale, it's fairly obvious. Like you'll have a seller be like, I just don't want to carry this anymore. I want to liquidate it. I'll break MAP because what are they going to do? And I'll liquidate my inventory. Yeah. And so you're like, okay, fine. And so it's easy to see that happening, and you can either meet them, but you want to continue with the supplier. So you probably don't want to break MAP. Assuming there's MAP, but assuming there's not MAP, you're like, I don't need to worry about that. You're the only one who's gone down. Or let's say everybody goes down. Cool. Let them take over for a week or two. Let them get upset that the price just quote unquote tanked and they never place a restock order. And you're still sitting there. You got a great relationship with your supplier. You go back to them and say, hey, listen, you see what happened? Here's my price history. It didn't change once. Guess where the buy box is back at? Where I'm at. Let's talk about having an exclusive agreement so this doesn't happen again. It'll work for both of us, right? So there's strategy behind it. And so it's not just keep me in the buy box, right? It's totally different. And, you got to consider the volume differences with wholesale versus RA. With RA, you might only have one to, let's say, I feel like the max is probably like 12 units, but, let's say 3 to 5 units per SKU. A lot of RA people that I've talked to so far as users are like, hey, I'm okay holding that inventory a little bit longer. I want a minimum ROI. So it's less about staying in the buy box, and it's more about, hey, I can hold this inventory for 30, 60 days. I just want minimum 20%, minimum 50% ROI. So what we end up going to do is when we set their minimum and maximum prices using the ROI settings, we just say, hey, we don't care what the minimum is, but I want 20% minimum. And max, let's say 80%, 100%, whatever realistic. So they will actually want to hold inventory a lot longer than maybe a wholesale person does, right? There's so many situations you can account for. Sometimes it's, even with wholesale, sometimes it is the fact that a price is tanking. Amazon came on the listing. Everybody's different there. I know when Amazon comes on a listing of mine, I'm like, I want out. Let's have a great relationship already. I want out. Now the supplier is selling directly to Amazon. I don't want this inventory. Liquidate it. Different strategies, right? So the key thing to keep in mind, whether you're doing wholesale or resale arbitrage, is you have to think through like, why is the price changing? And like, what's the logical progression here? And sometimes you just step back and you say, let's just watch how this plays. With wholesale, it's much easier because I've done it for so long. like we're learning so much about used books because we have a bunch of used book sellers that are becoming users. And we're like, man, I gotta like I'm learning so much from these users. I'm like, I've never done used books, and they're like, no, this is how we do this. It's like, that's incredible. Like, I'm sitting here talking about getting decent ROI, and they're like, dude, I'm buying books for 10 cents at Goodwill. I'm like, all right, well, it's a little different, right? So yeah, we're learning so much is incredible. The amount of business models on Amazon is phenomenal.
And I have to say, so I've been using Aura as well. So if anybody's not aware, James and Dillon have created a repricer that it's at goaura.com, GOAURA.com, that I just canceled my previous repricer because it was so intuitive at finding the buy box. And there have been a couple times that I'm like, oh, Dillon, I found your repricer loophole. I found an area that it's not doing well. And so I would manually override Aura and would do what I thought I needed. I'd raise the price or whatever. And sure enough, I would lose the buy box. And Aura had already figured out that if I went up to that price, it would lose the buy box. So I'm so grateful to have Aura. And I always go back to Aura. I have nothing that I'm repricing on my own. But if you're looking for a good repricer, I can't speak highly enough about Aura. And what I like about Aura is that Aura allows you to set map price so that you never have to worry about accidentally repricing down and ruining your relationship with a wholesaler, because most of the wholesalers that I've worked with have told me that they have had at least one seller that has broken map accidentally, that they didn't even realize that their repricer just didn't have the capability of being able to set that map price. And so
yeah, and it happens a lot. It's funny. We had a user reach out the other day. It was like, hey, I don't think Aura's working. I don't think it's repricing. We're like, okay, like let's dive in, right? I handle a lot of our support. So I'm like, let's figure out what's going on. He goes, no, it was. It just sold my inventory the way that I wanted it to. So now I have to place a restock order with a smiley face. I was like, okay, cool. I was like, you can't worry me like that. So it's cool to, even another user was like, and we're actually posting this testimonial on one of our landing pages here shortly, where Aura was raising his price. And so he was concerned because he's like, what's going on? Right? Like, aren't repricers only supposed to price down? I'm like, no. And he was getting sales higher than the buy box. And so he's like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm not, I don't want to touch anything. This is great. But that's what we want, like, is a smart repricing tool. Like, that's why we built it. And James has spent like the last, over a year developing this thing. And we're releasing new code every single week. I was just like, it's not necessarily about you being an expert in terms of repricing. It's letting the data do that for you, and then making decisions that might not make sense until you see it playing its strategy, and you're like, oh, okay, that made a lot of sense. I just couldn't see it, right? Because we as sellers, we can't see everything that's happening. You can see what's happening on a listing when you load the page, but there's so much happening nonstop in the background, real time. We get that stuff. So we can more easily make alterations that and this could be like split second things too, where like you just didn't even have time to see it, and we were able to trigger based off that. So it's pretty fun, but it's it's a blast. That's cool.
what I will say is, I know I personally needed to actually sign up for a repricer. I didn't realize it, but I didn't want to, I was already paying for all these subscriptions for all the software, and I didn't want to pay to reprice. So I just manually repriced. And when I signed up with my repricer, my sales went up 25%, literally as soon as it went live. And I went, okay, Jenna, you waited too long. But my question for you is, how does a new user know when it's time?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've had this question with VinDrive for the longest time and it's always like in parentheses, I know what you're going to say, because there's this assumption that if a user says, hey, here's where I am, regardless of what it is, we're just going to say yes. And we don't. Like, if you don't do wholesale and you do retail arbitrage, you probably don't need an account with VinDrive. I'm just going to throw that out there. Like, it's probably not going to help you that much, right? When it comes to repricing, and this isn't even just talking like our tool, I think you personally need at least 10 SKUs, period. I think at that point it justifies the cost, which granted we're far cheaper and we have a 14-day trial. And the reason why we have it structured that way is even for users who are like, I'm just not sure of the ROI. I'm not sure if I can justify the cost. We get that, right? We're sellers. We get it. So you could jump into a 14-day trial, increase your sales to cover the cost. Yeah, you make the additional revenue and profit before, upgrading to a paid account. I think to see the most value on the lower end is at least 10 SKUs though. And that's irregardless of the business model. Now what you can do with wholesale, because you need less SKUs, you could have 5 to 6 SKUs that you might need to reprice. It depends on the listings, right? If you have a lot of volatility in the pricing, probably need to do that because you're not talking about carrying, a handful of units. You're talking carrying dozens, hundreds, if not thousands of units and replenishing that inventory, in which case now it's a long-term play. So at least 10, if you're brand new, don't do what we all do and go buy every single tool. Tools do not make the business, they make the business better, but you have to have a business first. I'd rather you spend that money getting the business started, because we've had users be like, hey, I want to jump in so bad. Like I want to do this. I'm the first month selling. Hey, we're going to be here in a year. We're going to be here in 2 to 5 years. We'll be here. Don't rush. You're not missing anything right now. What you got to focus on is getting your business up and running, and then come to us and then we'll help you out. But if you don't have any inventory to reprice, we can't do much of anything for you. And, we're not a charitable organization. We don't want you to donate your money to us. We appreciate it. But, at the end of the day, we're focused on performance and outcomes for users. And if we can't give that to you because you don't have inventory or, you're just brand new, come hang out with us, obviously. But, just hang off a little bit when it comes to repricing.
What about other ways to scale this up using, automation or systems, or what other advice do you have there?
Yeah. So a big thing is to not view your Amazon business as this little thing. I know it might feel that way, but think about the amount of tech you have at your disposal already. Your $60 for your pro account for Amazon enables you to have an e-commerce business with logistics, everything across the board, customer service, all that. You're a tech company. It just doesn't feel that way. I say that because when you view it that way, you can start to look at what other tech companies do and mold it for your business. We did this when we launched the podcast. So you know what? I really want us to do a podcast. It would be super fun. We have a lot of great content we can share with the world. And, we don't have a ton of time though. Okay, well, let's look at how other people do that who are not Amazon sellers, who don't do what we do. And, I found there's a way we can actually automate the majority of this podcast. That's why we had Ari Mizell on. Like, I took his process for automating his podcast and said, let's just do it for ours. This is great, and I literally just followed his optimize, automate, outsource framework, and it was fantastic. And now we have this crazy growing podcast, and it's not that much added work to where we couldn't do it. Do that with your business, right? I'm working on some slides of teaching how to do this specifically when it comes to wholesale businesses. What we're trying to pioneer with VinDrive and Aura is having more connected tools in our industry. When tools can talk to each other, great things can happen. Automated things can happen, but they have to talk to each other. And so we're working on making that happen more, having more integrations across the board. It's going to take some time getting people, in this industry to be comfortable of doing that and saying, listen, we have a huge opportunity here to make Amazon sellers' lives better, make their businesses more profitable, more streamlined, more affordable even. Let's do it. Let's test it. But you don't have to wait for those things. There's so much stuff you can do, even when it comes to like batching. So instead of checking your restock orders or when you should, what you should restock every single day, only place restock orders on Thursday mornings. I mean, there's so many things you can do, because I know a lot of listeners and a lot of users are like, I'm either working full time, have a family, or both. And I get it, right? Like, me and James are not in the family mode yet, but we got a lot going on too. And you do have to be very effective and efficient with your time. And that's where systems, and it doesn't have to be automated. It can even be creating a checklist of, okay, when I source, this is what I do. When I place restock orders, this is what I do. I mean, I made a checklist that I shared with you guys earlier of my buying criteria. So when I go to place orders, I'm not thinking about today was crazy at work, hopefully I don't miss something. No, I did that. Yes, I did that. Yes, I did that. Okay, we're good. It can be that simple, but you can also scale it out to be a little bit better. And a lot of people default to going straight to outsourcing. You're doing yourself a disservice, and you're actually paying out way more than you need to when there's tools like automation that can do a lot of these things for you. I know you're starting to experiment with it a bit. I know Brandon Rudolph this year, he's like, I want to automate everything. And you should, because you can. And the cool thing is it's available to us. It's not reserved anymore for, Fortune 5,000 companies. Like it's not there. It's freely available. Most of it's free. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. And I'm working on putting some stuff together. Like, okay, here's how you can automate your restock process, like placing the orders, all that stuff. So that's really where I geek out with, because I've seen it from the Amazon side. I see it from the podcast side. And then, with Aura and VinDrive, we're doing that behind the scenes internally as well. It's how we're able to do so much, because people are like, how are you guys doing all of this? Automation. We're just super dorky. It's fine. Yeah. But that's how you scale. You have to have systems in place to enable you to scale. You don't scale and then have the systems. The systems come first, period.
I want to thank you, because everything that you just said in this podcast is exactly what I did. And I've been able to scale my business, and it's been so rewarding. So I really thank you for all the content that you put out for free. And I wanted to give you the opportunity, if you could give some, your little brother was getting into selling and you wanted to give him some really good advice, what would be the last couple of tips that you would give?
Oh, that's a good one. I have so many. Okay, here's a few. Either join a mastermind, and I don't mean a paid mastermind. I mean, find a group of 5 people in total that are similar in size, going towards a similar goal. You don't all have to be starting fresh. Have somebody who's been experienced a little bit more. Have somebody who's a little bit behind you, and hold each other accountable once a week. When you say, guys, I'm going to call 50 suppliers this week, and next week you called 40, you have to tell them you failed, period. But the benefit of it is you have somebody who's a little bit ahead of you who can say, hey, I can make this a little bit easier for you because I've gone through that. Don't worry about it. It's not that hard. Here's how you do this. Cool. But you're also doing it for the person who's a bit behind you. When you teach things, this is something I use in college all the time right now. I teach and tutor a lot in my classes. And not like formally, just who wants to study? Okay, let's go meet up. I'm the one who's going to sit up and say, okay, guys, here's how we do this. And if I don't know, I'll be like, all right, let's figure this out together. Because when you can teach something, you're forced to fully understand it. And it helps you become more of an expert very quick, because you're taking on this responsibility factor, and you got to get it together like quick. So I would do that. Hands down. We've had a few people in the Facebook group start to create their own little mini masterminds, and they meet once a week, and it's structured. Okay, what's everybody's going through? Here's the book we're going to read this week. Whatever the structure is, do that. The last thing that will absolutely have a profound effect is, are you doing this for the next 10 years? Are you committing to the next 10 years of this path? It's a real question. Because if you actually want to do this and it's important to you, that's an easy answer. If you hesitate, maybe you need to think about it. And that's okay too. That's fine. But some people are at this point where it's new. They're still in that fantasy phase of, I want to sell on Amazon. I want to have this great lifestyle, and that's cool. But the realities of this business is it's hard. You're going to get punched in the face a few times, probably a few times more. When you're thinking 10 years down the road, those punches, super small, don't hurt at all. When you're thinking 6 months down the road, they hurt a lot. A lot. So dealing with failure becomes really easy when you're thinking, yeah, but dude, this is like year 1 out of 10. Who cares that I struggled this whole year? I got 9 more years to figure this thing out. Cool. Way easier. So those 2 things, I think you'll be golden.
Well, thank you, Dillon. This has been very helpful, and thank you for completely revolutionizing my business. And I hope that your listeners will have the same experience.
Cool. Thanks. I'm glad we can turn the tables around a little bit.
Absolutely.
Fun times. Before we leave, I have a huge ask. If you enjoyed this podcast and you got value from it, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. The way we're able to have more impact on more sellers is by getting in front of them. We can do that by having more reviews and getting pushed to the top of iTunes podcasts. So leave us a review and let us know what you think of the podcast.